1985, yeah. Just after Hanuman was dead. 1985. Yeah, I'm that old. That doesn't look, I know. The thing is, as you know, I'm not a doctor. I'm a professional homeopath. But at that time, non-doctors were not allowed in the Liga to lecture. So I had to pretend to be a doctor. And I was walking around fearful all the time in case they discovered that I'm not a doctor. He invited me specifically to lecture on androctonus, on the proving of scorpion, which was very new then, people weren't doing proving, so he was interested. And he helped me disguise myself as a doctor. So I can pass as a doctor till today if I need to. But the scariest bit was when they put me on the lunch table with all the members of the Faculty of Homeopathy in England. And then I really had to pull a few stories out of my bag, you know. Otherwise they would have had me out. Anyway, thank you, Jacques, and somebody tell him that I mentioned him. So, let's move on here. And, well, no, I think I'll start with a little joke, actually. It'll have to be a Jewish joke. About this couple who came to the rabbi. And they said, look, we're not getting on, Rabbi, you know, can you help us? Can you give some advice? So he said to the man, tell your story. So he says, well, she's not helping in the house, she doesn't wash up, she doesn't cook for me, she's not interested in the kids, blah, 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 blah. So the rabbi said, you know what? You're right. So then the wife rushed forward and she said, what? He doesn't bring money home, he doesn't help, he's never with the kids, he's not doing anything, you know. So he said, you know what? You're right. So the rabbi's helper said, Rabbi, you know, you can't say to her she's right and to him he's right, you know, you have to decide something. So he said, you know what? You're right. And this is the way it reminds me of this conference, because we all have different methods, but I guess we're all right and we're okay. And my method is a method of no method, which is based on just keeping it simple. Because I teach a lot, and I find that the most important thing for students is to create, I teach postgraduate, but it's to give a method that anybody can do. I believe in a homeopathy that anybody can do, anybody can practice. And I try to make it that way. I try to make it simple and structured. And the method is simple. It's a structure. It's not a method. It's not a system. Basically, when I take the case, I don't think of anything else. No analogies, nothing. Not what the patient is like, not what they look like, not what they resemble, not what remedy, family, kingdom, anything. I try and take all those thoughts out of my mind. I don't think about them. And I just concentrate on the patient and what I see needs to be cured in the patient. Once I've got that, I focus only on what needs to be cured. And when I have that, I make a one-line synthesis of what needs to be cured. That is the part that needs practice and some kind of intelligence, because it's much more easy to break something down and to analyze something than to bring it together and to synthesize something. Synthesizing needs more from us. But with a bit of practice you can do that, and all my dynamic students will tell you that I make them do a synthesis of no more than 7 words for every case that should contain the whole idea of the case. Because once you have that, you focus really on perceiving you have perceived what needs to be cured. Once I've done that, the clever work is over. Then I just choose the largest, stupidest, most definite symptoms in the repertory. I combine from all repertories that I can. I'm a big believer in using all the sources and all the repertories. I do a Bonninghausen repertory, and then I look through all the remedies until I get what, Rajan? Bingo, yes. Yeah, bingo, Rajan. Okay, he's having a little nap too. I search all the remedies like that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, until I see something that matches my synthesis, and end of story. And most of the time, it works for me. So it's quite simple. And I use mainly the Bonninghausen system, large rubrics, where I'm sure the remedy is in the rubric. And only afterwards I go to characteristics, strange or peculiar strikings, etc. I use my Q-Rep, the repertory of mental qualities, in nearly every case. And I highly recommend it, even though I wrote it myself. It's really the best thing. I rarely use it in every case, except in Africa. I don't use it in Africa because there's no mental symptoms in Africa. But in the West, great. That's it. Let's do a case.
Having Massimo and then followed by Jeremy was, I think, two sides of the story. Because Massimo talked about complexity and you talk about keeping it simple.
That's why we love each other. And we both have olive trees.
So I think I understood that these are probably the two ways to look at where he sees the whole pattern in some way, a remedy as a pattern, but you would like to also see the central thread that runs through the whole story and connects everything. Is that right, more or less?
Can you say the last sentence again, that I would like to see?
You would like to see the connecting thread, which is the verb for you, right?
Yes, it could be the verb, but it could be other tools as well. It might just be when I connect the whole story in one thread, I use whatever the case is asking for. Sometimes it will talk to me in 4 elements, sometimes in 3 elements, sometimes in chakras, sometimes in Kabbalah, sometimes in colors, sometimes in music. Whatever tool I've got to understand that case, the case will tell me which tool to use.
But it was really wonderful to see these two ways of looking at the same story. Anyway, the other thing that I picked up from your case about the meteor is that while you came to it through symptoms, you also looked at the quality of the source and how the meteor, its action and its verbs corresponded. So in this conference we started with, Frederick with the symptomatology and the characteristic symptoms, and we moved on to Massimo with rounded picture, and now we are slowly introducing the idea of also having information from the source.
Yes, but I'd like to say something about that. It is true that I look at the meteor and I say, yes, it fits. It's got iron in, it falls from height into the sea, etc. But what I never do, and never is a strong word, but 99.9%, I never connect the signature, so to speak, straight to the case. So I don't say, wow, this case looks like a meteor, I'll give meteor. No, I go to the repertory, I repertorize, I find a remedy, then I look to the source. The direction for me is always remedy to source and never source to remedy. Because I know from doing so many provings that the most important thing in the proving is to get what you don't expect. A lot of first-time provers who do their first proving and they prove a bird, and then the prover has a delusion he can fly and dreams of flying. and sensation as if he has feathers growing out of his nose. And the prover says, wow, that's amazing, look at that. And we put in the repertory delusions flying, delusions feathers and all that. Not interesting. Not very interesting. Interesting 2 out of 10. But what I'm looking for in a proving is what I would never think of in the world. And let me give you some examples. The fact that you all know that chocolate produces hedgehog thing, It took me 4 years to understand what a hedgehog has got to do with chocolate. You know, in the end I understood it, but I couldn't guess it at all. Yeah. What is a hedgehog? Eagle. Right? In German, Egel. Or, take for example, why does the proving of eagle, Haliaetus leucocephalus, yes, you would expect it to fly, but would you expect it to be totally schizophrenic and desire to kill with a knife? Or the proving of salmon. In the proving of salmon, everybody came back and said, this is wolf. You're proving wolf. Never expected that. Now I have to understand for another 4 years what has wolf got to do with salmon. And this is in the proving of Brassica napus, people come back and say to me, you're proving the flat-billed platypus. What's a flat-billed platypus? Ah, yeah, that thing. Okay. But I would never expect that in a million years. Every proving has that. I haven't seen a proving that doesn't have something I won't expect, and that's what I'm interested in, because the world doesn't function in the world of simple substance. In the Akashic records is not a straight line, it's a spiral, and things relate together in analogy that you wouldn't expect to relate together, and only afterwards you could see them. So I never compare my case to think, look, this looks like a hedgehog, so I should give hedgehog. Because I know that a hedgehog isn't what it seems. Or even the proving of helium brought out a bald-headed eagle. So the provers come back and say, we know what we're proving, bald-headed eagle. Okay. You see, I have a little game I play. When I do a proving, at the end of the proving, I ask my provers, first of all, I say to them, now we've heard all the symptoms, we know what this is about, we've tried to understand it. Guess the kingdom. What kingdom is this? Animal, mineral, vegetable, fungi? I've never had a group guess the kingdom right. Usually something between 0 and 20%, that's the most. If it's a mineral, they say it's a plant. If it's a plant, they say it's an animal. And it's just an interesting experiment to me, because I say the world is not WYSIWYG. You know what WYSIWYG is? What you see is what you get. WYSIWYG. It's an old computer term.
But I often have the idea that the ideas that I get them for free from somewhere. So they're not mine. But I'm glad that I found them, because it helps me in my own practice. That's for me always the starting point. When I have a case that I cannot help, what can I do? What can I find that that case is also solved? And that's what's guiding me. So this Congress is about unity, but also about diversity. You know, we have to acknowledge that every one of us is different, also in his own way of doing practice. And that's why our differences between all of us. But in principle, the principles we use are all the same. So there we have unity, but we all have our own styles in techniques that we use, in approaches, in our own way of being. And that's beautiful, because that's also the specialty that we want to see in patients, that we also acknowledge that in us. Now, one of my principles that I learned during homeopathy is that the more remedies you know, the more people you can cure. And in a way, that's the law of similars. You know, when you know more remedies, you see more similiments. And that's guided me to search, especially in cases where it didn't work. And the case that I will show you the same kind of principle. And a very prominent thing in the plant theory is what I call the remedy code. As you can see here, this is for belladonna. The remedy code has 7 numbers. The last number is this 06, but that's the stage, so that's one number. And the others are also one number. And they each say something about the remedy. Now the first number here in Belladonna is 3, and it means it's a plant. It's from the plant kingdom. And then you have 3 numbers, in this case of Belladonna, 665, and they point to the series. So the 6 is Gold Series Lanthanides, and the 5 is the 5th series, which is Silver Series. So in Belladonna there is an aspect of Gold Series Lanthanides. I think that's an aspect that most of you have not seen very clearly due to the aggression. But it's definitely there too. There's a kind of desire to be independent, to be autonomous in Belladonna and in all the nightshades. The Silver Series, I will come back to it too, which is also important for Belladonna. And then you see 2 numbers, 7-1 here in this case, and they are connected to phases. Now, phases is something new that's not in the element theory, but it's very prominent in the plant theory. And as you can see, there are 2 phases. One is here 7, the other is 1. And I call the second one the subphase to make a differentiation. I could have called them also stages because they are very similar to stages, the phases. But I wanted to make a clear differentiation, so that's why I call them phase and subphase. And the last number is the stage, just as in the element theory.
Can I just ask and you can answer?
Yeah.
How do you, once you have the structure, how do you slot the remedies into each slot?
How I come to the code for each number, for each remedy.
Yeah, how do you choose which remedy goes into each code?
Of course, you have the background of what is the classification of the botanists, which is the APG classification. Now that's a good classification, but it's not perfect. So, for instance, you see the family of the Solanaceae, but I don't treat it as one family, but as 4 families. So it's not a perfect classification, but it's a good start because it shows the similarities. And the classification confirms most of the classifications that were there in the past. But we don't have a good classification in botany. That's one of the big differences of the element theory. In the element theory, you have the periodic table, and the periodic table is fixed. It's finished. It's, there's no discussion about it. It's what it is. So we don't have to discuss that. But in the plant kingdom, there's still a lot of discussion going on, and for instance, the Cronquist classification that Michael Yakir is using is a bit different. There are differences in there, but there's a lot in common. The majority is in common, but there are also differences. And I think some of the things that Cronquist is doing were wrong, according to what I see in homeopathy. But the other way around too. Some things in Cronquist are better than the APG. So in a way I'm transferring a little bit back to old classifications too. But I look all the time what's the homeopathy doing. And the thing is that with homeopathy we can make a much better classification than the botanist can. The reason for that is they use mostly the analysis with DNA, and they think the DNA is the essence of the plant. But I disagree with that. The DNA is not the essence, it's just a library that plants can use. And it's everywhere. It's just a library that life can use to find some solutions. And you can see that also in the way how our immune system works. When we have an infection, the cells start to mutate very fast to find a new kinds of selection of DNA that forms an antibody against that infection. So DNA is very flexible. It is as if our life starts searching in that database, in that library, what kind of combinations can I use to fight this new infection? So DNA is, according to my view, is not the essence. And the essence of life is life. But the problem with our science is material, so they cannot find life, so it cannot find the essence. And we can, because we see what it does inside. So that's why I think we can make a much better classification than the botanists can do. So what I do, I use the families, that's the starting point. And I'm still busy to refine it. It's not finished. And the problem is to find a stage, because there is no way so far as I know, that you can deduce the stage from how the plant is. So you have to find it out with provings, with clinical cases, with anthroposophical information, guesses, whatever. And that's what I do. And from the materia medica, I started first with the materia medica. Yeah, what's essential in those remedies, or they must be stage 10 or whatever. Huh? For instance, olive tree is stage 10. Huh? It's a very big, old tree, living very long. It's prominent, standing there. Huh? So you can see it already partly from how the plants are. And the ones in the middle, the stage 10, are often the biggest. They have the most show outside. Huh? The ones at the sides are often much smaller. So there are hints that I use. I use all kinds of information to come to it. It's a search and a kind of experimentation and a kind of guessing and intuition and all things you use till you have found it. Well, with the Datura metal, I found it in another case, but there it was a guess. But he reacted beautifully. So then for me it was clear, this must be stage 7. He had the same kind of attitude. Also, it was a story about war. But it was a past life, and a bit different, but very, very similar in basic themes.